fundamental flaw, among others, of the draft that we're intending to consult, so to speak. We don't believe that the bank can implement the policies that it has. We even have much greater doubts from what little we've seen that it can implement the policies that are implied in this proposal. Yet we don't see any resource-related aspects of how that can change, despite having asked for it for over a year. Another missing element for why this can't be called a consultation. Finally, we've been advised in discussions with the highest levels in the banks that we should stop using the word safeguards. We should start using the word standards. When we were told that the only thing that happened on July 30th was the authorization of this draft for consultation, it seems like some people have already taken on board that we have already moved forward with adopting this draft. And so at best, I think this can be called a very incomplete information session, but not a consultation. And so let's be careful. We have pointed out on a number of occasions why we think President Kim has broken one promise to us about not diluting this draft. So we should be careful about calling this a consultation to make matters worse. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Peter Bacchus. I'm with the International Trade Union Confederation. Stefan Kuberle, in his introduction, invited comments on the process. So I'm happy to come back on the specific labor issues later. But on the process, he mentioned the first multi-stakeholder consultation that took place in Tbilisi, Georgia, 2 weeks ago. I think was the 25th of September. Now, if this is an indication of the kind of consultations that the bank intends to hold, I think we can be deeply skeptical about how broad a range of views are being sought. We have an important, we represent 76 million workers organized in national organizations in various countries. Quite a strong one in Georgia. GTUC is its English acronym. We learned with a few days' notice that this was taking place. It was, I think, put on the World Bank's website perhaps a week before it actually happened. Our affiliate contacted the local World Bank office about participating. They were told they were not invited, they could not take part. They finally were able to take part by appealing to government authorities, to various international organizations, that they took it upon themselves to contact the bank to say there's no reason for excluding this organization. So if the intention is to hold consultations with a select group of CSOs, major beefs with what is put forward, I think that's totally deplorable. And that is not, that doesn't meet anybody's standards of a proper consultation. So I'm happy later on to get back to the labor issues specifically where I'm sure they raised issues with you, and I'll do so myself. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm Carla Garcia Sendejas from the Center for International Environmental Law here in Washington. I have a specific question about the inclusion of international law in the actual draft. It's peppered in a very light way, and not in a very. There are references to it in some of the ESS, the safeguards, the standards, as they're called now. But the only place where actual names of international treaties, which appears as in the pollution prevention, possibly, where Montreal is mentioned, etc. So why can't we just mention ILO 169? Why can't we mention the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples? They are there. They are standards. They are international standards of law that clearly countries have signed on to and that we can include, and that immediately sets a level on a specific issue. Why isn't it possible to just include it in the many areas?
Okay, we'll get back to that. Okay, is this also on process? Because we want to just carry on.
I'd like to ask my question. It's not on process, but it's on a general issue, but I'd like to ask it still.
Okay, so what we'll do is let's get back to the way we had stressed. First of all, are the people who made the points on the consultation and the process. We've heard you. This is the start of the second phase. As we go through the phase, it's our own intention to make sure that it is at the end of the day a process that meets our own standards of what a consultation should be. And so I hope that as we go through the phase, you'll have a bit more faith in what we are doing. In terms of the specific questions, I think what we are trying to do is go through where we've heard a lot of the feedback and the criticism. So let's go through those topics, and we'll keep space for any questions that haven't got covered in any of those topics. So if that's okay.
Well, yeah, we'd like to make comments now.
Yeah, we'll keep. Okay, why don't the two of you make those comments, but then let's just proceed, because we've got a lot of people waiting to ask questions on specific topics.
Thank you. Well, first, we want to make a comment about human rights, because I think this is central to the framework. I have to disagree with the comment that the draft helps borrowers meet their human rights obligations. I think the draft is weak on human rights. It's placed in a section that's non-binding and enforceable. The draft also provides, or doesn't provide, how the bank would actually operationalize these commitments through human rights due diligence, for instance. You raised the issue of FPIC, that's great, but the draft allows countries to opt out of applying indigenous people safeguards. This is a huge carve-out and exclusion, and it sets the precedent that human rights is optional or discretionary, and that's not the message that this bank should be sending. So the approach to human rights is inadequate, in our opinion. It is inadequate. It doesn't protect the environment and communities the way we should be doing, as we're looking forward to what the bank should be doing in the next years. And it's certainly inadequate for the world's premier public institution on development. So my question is, will you commit to supporting, will you commit the bank to not supporting any activities that contribute to, or exacerbate human rights? Or are you going to help with these? Are you going to help create these enabling environments where human rights are violated?
I'm David Pred with Inclusive Development International. I have a comment about the overall framework that Mark presented. And I want to focus on 9 words in the draft, in the policy, which I think really are the root of all evil in this draft. And those 9 words are, in a manner and time frame acceptable to the bank. These 9 words serve to turn the bank's 34-year commitment to do no harm through rules that are binding on both the bank and the borrower into a set of aspirations. And it gives bank staff complete discretion to decide when, how, and if borrowers are complying. And the problem with that, the problem with giving World Bank staff such unbelievable discretion is, as the 9,000 men, women, and children who were forcibly evicted and left homeless by the bank and the Lagos state government in Badia East will tell you, all of the incentives at the World Bank are lined up against doing no harm. They're lined up in the direction of what is politically expedient. And so the convergence of that total discretion that is granted in this draft with the very problematic incentives and accountability structure at the World Bank, we believe is incredibly dangerous. And that's why we want to see the bank maintain its commitment to rules, to compliance with those rules, and ensure that those rules are binding on both the bank and the borrower. And we want you to delete those 9 words. Thank you.
My name is Obang Meto from the Solidarity and from Ethiopia. And I would like to allude to what David said before me. When we speak about the process, that meaning the participation of others. When we speak about consultation, that's also that the decision and participation on others. What we see in the draft seems to see by saying that the safeguard, we will hand it to the borrower. I'll go back to what David said before me. World Bank is not like a Walmart. Walmart can do whatever they want to do. The World Bank, there's supposed to be consultation of the people, that's why we are here. And I would like you to look at us as civil societies. We are not against you guys. We are not against the developments. But we are against when this is done to harm other people. So my point, what I'm trying to say here, if the safeguard, we are going to give it to the borrower, I'll go back to my point I said, consultation and process is participating other people. The country where I come from, in Ethiopia, the government claimed that they win 99.9%, 99.96%. Do you think that in a country like that, is there any process? And if it's in a country, out of 547 seats, there's one only opposition, do you think that there's consultation there? And if you think that we need the participation of the civil society, and Ethiopia is against the law for civil society. In Ethiopia, just one journalist who wrote as a blogger that what Ethiopians are afraid of the most is not the terrorists, but they are afraid of food, not have the food to eat. She's locked up in jail. So now when we are talking about giving a safeguard to other people, what about those countries who don't even acknowledge the safeguard of their own people? How do we make them accountable? Because in those kind of environments, accountability doesn't exist, rule of law doesn't exist, good governing doesn't exist, the value that which is the World Bank was for. So in other words, instead of helping the people, it's hurting the people. Instead of creating food security, creating cost in food insecurity. So in other words, I just want to leave it. We, as civil society, would like to have a guideline that protect the well-being of the people. So let invest in the human right and the human dignity rather than those people that who will harm the people. Thank you.
Morning.
Yeah, morning.
I'm Rio Ismail from Indonesia.
Yeah, we'll hear you, and then let's get the panel to respond to this set, and then we'll continue.
Oh.
Yeah, no, carry on, carry on.
Stephanie translate to all of you. Sebetulnya saya berharap pertemuan kali ini itu sudah diawali dengan banyak dokumen yang dibagikan.
Initially, I hope that this meeting would be preceded by the provision of many detailed documents for us to read.
Saya melihat baru tadi malam Anda membagikan beberapa dokumen yang sebetulnya penting untuk pertemuan ini.
I noticed that last night, there were documents, almost 60 pages worth of documents posted on board that were actually quite critical for anything that would resemble a consultation.
Ya, oleh karena itu saya menganggap ini sebetulnya tidak bisa kita sebut sebagai konsultasi.
Because of that, I consider that we can absolutely not consider this a consultation.
Saya dalam pertemuan konsultasi tahap pertama di Jakarta ada Charlie juga hadir dan kami sudah mempersoalkan dokumen penting untuk ada pada tahap pertama.
I attended the consultation or the meeting in Jakarta that Charles also attended, and at that point also, that was I think in 2012. At that point also, we made the same. We had the same finding that the provision of documents prior to the consultation is of the utmost importance.
Dan ini akan ada kaitan dengan dokumen yang terlambat, kemudian Anda mengagendakan ada konsultasi tahap kedua di Jakarta pada bulan Desember.
This late provision of documents in English is also connected to the proposed consultation in Indonesia that you have on your calendar for December.
Maka saya mengharapkan agar proses konsultasi Desember itu ditangguhkan karena kami akan butuh proses yang banyak untuk membahas apa yang Anda launch tadi malam dalam dokumen-dokumen yang Anda bagikan.
And I hope that you will certainly be postponing that consultation because we ourselves need a very long process in our own language in order to understand these documents and to be able to provide any meaningful input.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So what we'll do is let's respond to this set of observations and comments and then we'll keep proceeding in whichever way you all feel is the most effective way to proceed. So there was a set on international law and human rights, which I think Charles might want to answer. And then the questions about the overall framework, the amount of discretion that's been given to the bank, and then another question on what we are really handing over to the borrower, and how do we make accountable those countries where protections are weak. And then there was this last comment again on the consultation. So maybe between Stefan and Mark on the overall framework and the question of the bank and the borrower. So Charles, would you like to start?